We're going backstage with Carlos Candal, the man who brought Hamilton, Miss Saigon, and currently Les Misérables World Tour Spectacular to Philippine audiences. How does staging world-class musicals and immersive event experiences translate into business growth?
The thing is, with live entertainment, it's live, and the experience of the audience members, it's a shared experience. The experience market globally is very popular across all sorts of age ranges. People like theatre here. As long as people support us, come and see these things, and it's something that I want to continue doing.
We are now open for business.
It is a signal to the world. We are open for business.
On the spotlight is a company that's changing the way Philippines experiences live entertainment. From bringing Broadway and West End masterpieces to Manila, to unlocking bold new ways to connect with audiences through immersive events and controlling the whole supply chain. With us is Carlos Candal, founder and CEO of GMG Productions, a visionary behind landmark musicals and immersive events. How are you, Carlos?
Hi, I'm very good, Caesar.
I have a lot of questions here, but maybe I just have to bring you back during the pandemic because,
Really?
Yes, because I remember that time, one of the major sectors that was affected was theaters, cinemas. I know that you've been in the business for so long, but so far, how many years?
37.
37. So how did it affect you during the pandemic and immediately after?
Well, obviously that was a crazy time for everybody, and I actually had Matilda running at Solaire during that time, and we were looking at what was going on globally with the figures from COVID, and we obviously saw the first death outside of China was in the Philippines, and this is getting closer to the opening of Matilda, and the ticket sales are getting slower and slower. And before that, I was actually supposed to be doing the merchandising, which you won't believe, for The Lion King in Wuhan, opening in February. So I knew that was cancelled, and we knew that there was some sort of issue in China.
And the lockdown started what? Feb or March? March, I think.
Just into March. So I opened Matilda on the 6th of March, and the sales were getting slower and slower. Obviously, the cases of COVID were then going up. And we literally ran for 6 performances, and then we had to close on the 12th of March. I had 96 actors from around the world and cast and crew essentially that were in the show that we had to evacuate out of the country with 48 hours notice. So when I found out that news about midnight on the 12th of March, I was obviously feeling rather devastated and depressed about the losses and the headaches and logistics that were going to happen. But then when I woke up the next day, I found out, Broadway's closing. So I thought, okay, so my problems aren't quite as bad as everybody else's.
Okay.
And then after that, London followed. But I actually produce or co-produce or merchandise over 100 or 200 shows at any one time. So I was looking at the whole thing going, I thought I had a wonderful idea 37 years ago to set up a business in entertainment, for merchandising, producing, co-producing, and expand it globally. We have 14 offices around the world. But then it wasn't such a great idea when a virus comes along that closes the entire world down. So that's essentially what happened. And then, of course, there was little activity going on everywhere. The Philippines had one of the strongest lockdowns, as you know. But then what I started to do is I actually started to develop a rapid COVID test with a company called Frank D, where we could test actors and anybody involved in a show that would enable a show to go ahead. So if you go forward about a year into the pandemic, I developed that system with a group of people, and I then managed to put on the first show worldwide in London, Sleepless in Seattle, where all the cast and crew were tested, the audience came in and they were socially distanced. So that's what we did. Now commercially that was difficult, but at least we got something going. And then at the same time, I actually was producing a pantomime in New Zealand in December 2020. So I literally had the only show playing, I think, in the world in December of 2020, because New Zealand was, as you know, kind of bubble to the world. There weren't many cases, and then after that it started to, you know, they had their own cases. I was doing another tour down there of Madagascar, which we stopped and started, you know, 2 or 3 times.
That's quite a feat with the change in business model, or with the many adjustments that you did. How was it commercially in terms of you as an entrepreneur?
It was incredibly tough. Every country had different regulations and support, government support. So, you know, in my business in the UK, we had support from the government for the staff, where the staff were put on furlough, and the government were paying a certain percentage of their salaries, which means I could maintain my staff, but they weren't allowed to do any work. But at least it protected their jobs. In places like China, there was very little support. There wasn't any meaningful support, you know, for businesses, and obviously the Philippines, there wasn't any meaningful support commercially either. So it was very difficult, but I obviously made the decision to keep my team in place, because I've been going 37 years. We've got 100 odd people globally. And I kept it going, and I, you know, personally paid to support all of those people in a way to make sure that when COVID eventually finished, you know, we had everybody in place, and I wasn't looking to then try and restart my business, which was an incredibly smart move, to be honest. And also, in all fairness, my staff, particularly that were here, it's not like anybody could go out and spend any money, because we were all stuck at home with our masks and face shields on.
So far, what are your learnings there? Like, say, for example, of course, we see people now going back to the theater. Some people still watch, you know, go to the cinemas, but we see the decline in terms of numbers, because a lot of them go online. So how do you manage, you know, the change in the business model and how consumers react to this development?
I think it was, you know, it's different to cinema, I believe, than live theatre, because obviously everybody got into watching Netflix and, you know, the various platforms, and actually Hamilton was put on Disney Plus, so that there was some live streaming of theatre shows. I was involved with 1 or 2 of those projects as well. But the thing is, you know, with live entertainment, it's live, and the buzz and the experience of the audience members is it's a shared experience. You know, it's the same as concerts. You know, it's different. The cinema, yes, you know, sometimes people interact a bit, but it's not the same thing. You know, if you watch a theatrical show streamed just in your house, you get 5% of the experience that you get if you go and watch it in a theatre.
Now, Carlos, what's different, although you mentioned how different the experience of watching a live theater, live production, but have you noticed any changes in customer behavior or the audience behavior? How are they appreciating live entertainment or live plays and musicals now?
They certainly missed it. You know, when the world sort of opened up, there was a resurgence of people wanting to get back into the theatre. But what was interesting actually was that the more established titles were the ones that people really wanted to go and see. You know, things like Mamma Mia, you know, which I've been involved with for years and years. But it was a massive uplift in the box office, sold out, because people said, okay, I want to go back to the theatre. What's a show that's going to cheer me up? You know, I've been locked at home for all this time. Mamma Mia, perfect, no-brainer. And then the other big titles, you know, Phantom, obviously Hamilton, Saigon, the kind of larger titles that we bring here. There was a lot of product that was also available because the whole world stopped. So if you look at it in terms of, you know, my business in particular with Manila and international touring, we then found ourselves in a situation where everybody wanted to go out again, but then we couldn't schedule it around the market, because it's not just Manila where I'm obviously presenting shows as GMG Productions. We also deal with Australia, New Zealand, as I mentioned, Hong Kong and Singapore. And when we, you know, take a title, we try and maximise it to go to all of those markets, which might sound like that's an easy thing to do, but it's actually highly complicated when that tour could be coming from the UK, you know, from the US or from Australia. So there was a real backlog, and it was hard for us to programme shows in originally. The first one that I did was the Queen musical, We Will Rock You. But that was the first show in. I did it in Manila and Singapore, and there was a hesitation and a reluctance at that point, especially here, because we were so used to wearing masks and the face shields that people, I think, were a little bit nervous of going and sitting next to somebody they didn't know who might have a cough, you know. And obviously there was no mask mandate at that time, but we had to start. Somebody has to start. So we started. We didn't get the number of sales that we wanted to have in either Manila or Singapore. But then, you know, I followed that with Hamilton. So that's obviously one of the world's biggest titles, and we put that on sale. There's enormous demand for that. And since then, you know, we've seen a very strong demand for bringing in the right shows, of course.
I'd like to ask, because you mentioned a lot of countries, which of these countries are most appreciative of live entertainment?
I think every country has its nuances, but of course, you know, the Philippines is embedded in entertainment. Everywhere you go, you know, there's people singing, you know, let's not even mention karaoke, but, you know, so many entertainers, you know, so many fantastic singers, so many fantastic artists, you know, people have really brought up with entertainment as part of the culture here. So that's one of the reasons, you know, why I like bringing shows here, apart from the fact I've lived here for 17 years, this is my home. But of course, that's different to markets like London and New York, where you've got, you know, a transient market, lots of tourists, which is why you can have shows, you know, that can sit there. Mamma Mia's been there for 26 years almost, you know. Obviously, Phantom's been running there, I think, for 30 or 40 years, Les Misérables, 40 years. So in markets where you've got a lot of people coming in from different countries, there's always the excitement for people to go and see. You're going to London, you're going to see a show, you're going to see Big Ben, you know. Slightly different to the market here because there's not so many tourists, unfortunately, that come through to the Philippines. And if the tourists come in, certainly, you know, from established markets, why would they go and see Les Misérables in Manila when they could watch it in London or Broadway? But then my philosophy on that is, let me bring the shows here so that you don't have to go and spend a fortune going to London to watch Les Misérables. You can come and watch it with me at Solaire and pay a very reasonable price ticket for that experience.
As you mentioned, there's a lot of nuances per country, nuances in terms of how they react to entertainment. But so far, which government is really supportive in terms of the arts and entertainment?
The UK are very supportive. The government, when you produce a show, you can essentially get a tax rebate up to 40% of the production costs, which increased before COVID.
That's huge, 40%.
40% tax break, yeah. It was 20% before COVID. The US have a similar structure. I'm not, you know, precise on the percentages, but, you know, the UK, of course, is the home, if I can say that, of theatre, really. And it brings an enormous amount of money to the economy, especially in London, billions and billions of pounds for people that will come away, you know, stay in hotels, eat, drink, and see other sites. So so they do support it very well. We don't get any support here, you know, from the government in terms of financing. I mean, obviously, I'm running a commercial.
Even tax incentives?
No, nothing. I mean, obviously, you know, it's a private company. My company is private, so we self-fund everything ourselves. But what is important is that we have really good partners. So, of course, you know, Solaire, obviously, number one, because they've got the best integrated resort in the country, and the theatre by far has the best facilities. There's nothing even close to it, and I don't believe there will be anything that will match Solaire in terms of us wanting to bring the best shows to it.
There are a lot of other countries in the world. Why Manila?
Well, English speaking, love of arts, love of theatre. I mean, one of my partners, Bob Sewell, set up Ticket World 30 odd years ago. He was the first, one of the first ticketing agencies. So he's been involved in this industry across multiple formats, you know, from concerts to plays to theatres to events. It just makes perfect sense for us to bring shows here. People want shows here, and also we like to start international tours here. So, you know, Hamilton again is an example of that, where we actually started the whole Asian tour from Manila. So we rehearsed it in Manila, and then it went on to Singapore and other territories. And that's obviously because it's a cost-friendly place in terms of rehearsals. If you look at rehearsing in Hong Kong or Singapore, you know, it's very hard to get space, it's very expensive. The hotels and everything are more expensive. So here we can actually set up a show, rehearse a show more economically, but also all of the shows that we do, Manila is the favourite place, there's no doubt about it, for the cast and the crew. they all love Manila. You know, it's a great experience. People are great. It's great to go out, you know, reasonably, you know, inexpensive if they want to, you know, have dinner, and just the whole experience is so much better. You know, as I say, in other countries, some of the hotel rooms will be smaller, it'll be more expensive. You know, of course, the climate here is fantastic. You know, compared to being in, you know, in China in December where it's -10 or Korea -20. Of course, you know, that's the preference to be in a place like this.
What makes the Philippines an attractive market for touring Broadway and West End productions?
We have a core fan base of about 150 to 200,000 people that will come to see the shows depending on the genre. You know, Les Mis is a slightly older audience. We brought Six in, which was a, you know, fantastic show. We ran it for 2.5 weeks, sold out, but that brought in a much younger crowd. It was a great show. People like theatre here. A lot of the audience members, you know, tell me, and they tell my staff, oh, you know, we went to see Miss Saigon in London, and you know, we like this cast member better, or you know, they're engaged about it, and it's just the convenience that you can go and see it here in Manila. Now, okay, traffic can be a challenge, as we always know, to get anywhere, but it's certainly better than a 15-hour flight to New York or a 24-hour flight to London, right?
With your business model, touring them, so what's your challenge in putting a cast? I know that they may not necessarily be coming from one area, the same people who you tour to different countries. What's your challenge in putting them all together to create a world-class entertainment?
Well, typically with a world tour, we'll put together a cast, or there'll be an international producer that will put together a cast, either UK, Australian, sometimes it was South African or US, or a mixture of, and then they will be contracted for a year. So they'll have a tour list. This is the first year. You know, usually with these type of shows, I mean, Les Misérables is coming to the end after Manila, it goes to Singapore, then that's the end of the second year of that tour. So the cast will be contracted for that year, and then there'll be another cast. Some cast members may want to stay and some may not want to stay, so it'll be recast for another year. And if you look at you know, one of my favourite tours, Mamma Mia, you know, which is in the 21st year of the international tour this year. Now, that's when that started. The producer, Nick Grace, who's also the international producer of Les Mis, is a very good friend of mine. And when we looked at that initial routing, it was about an 18-month tour, and it's never stopped. And it's been round to places. You know, we want to have it back here. It's been to Manila twice. We want to have it back again in the next 2 or 3 years. You know, and I'm working on programming shows up until 2029, just because we have to get into those tours. You know, once we know that something's happening, we have to pick the route. We want to put Manila in there, we want to put New Zealand in there. We end up with a sort of 20-week tour just for GMG Productions out of that world tour. So that's quite a significant part of the commercials that the international producer needs to find. You know, if he can say to me, look, Carlos, I've got this show, would you like it? And say, yeah, I'd like it. Can I have it for 20 weeks? And that's going to make him happy, rather than say, oh, I can do maybe 4 weeks in Manila or 6 weeks in Manila.
But one of the challenges is choosing a specific country or location, and also choosing a material. Like, say, for example, you said Les Mis will run here until March, and then you will bring it to Singapore. How do you choose the country and the material? Is there also some kind of a survey in a specific country where, oh, we want you see the clamor of that production first before you eventually fund it for production?
I'm spread into pretty much every show across every country around the world. So every time there's a new show that opens in London or on Broadway, I will typically invest, and depending on the size of investment, maybe co-produce and also get the merchandise, the souvenir, you know, part of that. So I go into every show, also the experiences, because, you know, we did the Friends experience here, we've got Brickman, World of Lego here. I'm doing a Minecraft experience globally, which is just expanding. They opened 1 unit in Dallas, and now we're opening 7 more units this year around the world. But the thing is, I go into everything, and then after that, we always do surveys, post-show or in-show surveys to our audiences at Solaire. So we'll put a list together. What do you want to see next? And then we'll get a few votes, and we'll take that as part of our planning. You know, not that that's always precise, because you're getting to core audience members that are already engaged fans. You know, but we try and also do wait lists with Ticket World. But again, you're still going to people that are interested in entertainment. So it's kind of hard to say, well, how do we get the people that are going out and spending their money in restaurants that aren't particularly thinking about theatre? So it's difficult, but of course, you know, if you pick a show that's already a hit globally, then you like to think, well, that should work in the Philippines, but that's not always the case, because some things do not appeal to the market here, or they won't appeal to the market in Hong Kong. So there are things that we have to take into account. It's very complicated. The long-winded version of saying it's complicated, but we seem to have mastered the art so far.
You created a whole new entertainment subculture. What inspired you? What inspired pivoting or diversifying from traditional theater staging to immersive, fan-centric events?
Theatre was the core of the business that Bob did with Ticket World originally, and then obviously I've been doing with GMG Productions. But because I'm involved with so many experiences globally, the Friends Festival was one of the first big ones probably, which I've been involved with for a dozen years or so with Warner Brothers. But when you see things like that, you think, well, that appeals obviously to the Philippines and other markets, as does Brickman, as does Minecraft, you know. And then I say I'm doing at the moment a Titanic show, Pompeii, King Tut. You know, there's a lot of experiences that I'm involved in. So I wanted to bring Friends specifically to Asia, to Manila, you know, Singapore, Hong Kong, India, China, New Zealand. So I was looking to get a space to put that into. Now, you might think that's easy, but it's really not easy to find a space, you know, 1,500 to 2,000 square meters. There are lots of malls, but the ones that have the spaces weren't really the best locations or the best, you know, type of mall. So in the end, I was talking to Solaire, as I do on a regular basis, and I said, look, I know that you've got a space here. Would you think about creating that as a space for me? Because if you do, I can fill it with experiences. So we literally there and then said, okay, let's do it. And then a few months later, they refurbished the space and we opened it with the Friends experience, which was an absolute smash. You know, I mean, people breaking down the door to buy tickets to get in.
How are people receiving it now?
No, they loved it. I mean, it opened in September. We ran it for a couple of months, and it was an incredible experience. Everybody had a great time. As I say, it was pretty much sold out through the run, and then after that, we wanted to bring in a family show, you know, Brickman with the Wonders of the World, which is you go around, you see 45 Wonders of the World made out of Lego, which are seriously incredible. If you have to think that, you know, and some of them say on there, you've got you know, the Mona Lisa, and you've got Concorde, an enormous Titanic, and it will tell you how many bricks that has been made, and it took somebody, you know, 300 hours, you know, to build this thing. And you know, and I know from my own personal experience with my kids, you know, it takes me hours to build the smallest thing.
I know.
So you know, but people can go in with their kids. It doesn't necessarily need to be with kids, but they can go and sit next to one of these things, recreate. My son recreated a pyramid next to the pyramid. We wanted just to bring that in as a family-friendly thing. Now we're looking, once that finishes, we're looking at either developing one of our own sort of, you know, GMGP IP-owned experiences that will have a different market appeal, because at the moment, you know, we're trying to sort of find out, you know, where's the sweet spot going to be. It's a bit of an experiment, to be honest, and this is why I have a partnership with Solaire that we embrace, and we kind of, you know, bash ideas off each other for what we bring in. So after that, I've got another very big IP coming in, which I can't mention at the moment.
Okay.
But there will be a few. So a bit like what I'm doing with the production side is you know, I'm taking the best shows, obviously if they're available, to bring them into Solaire. And then there are other shows, obviously, that are going around that you wouldn't necessarily say is an A show, but they're all good shows, you know, and popular shows that we also bring in. And the market, up until recently, has only been allowing for sort of one big show and maybe one medium-scale show. But I'm bringing, this year we've got 6 months of shows actually. We've got 4 big shows coming in theatrically, and then we're going to have about 9 months worth of experiences in the space. The experience market globally is very popular, you know, across all sorts of ranges, age ranges, and there hasn't been a dedicated space for it. There are things obviously that happen in malls, you know, we're all aware of those things, but the quality of those activations are not what I believe that Filipino people would like to see. So that's my sort of personal experiment at the moment, but hopefully it will work out as long as people support us, you know, and come and see these things, and it's something that I want to continue doing.
Wow, you know, Carlos, it's amazing to learn all these, but now what I'm interested to know is your inspiration behind all of these. Like, I know that you have your mastery of co-producing this, you know, international and world-class productions, and now you're also creating new creative experiences. What's the inspiration behind it? I know that, as you mentioned, you also get feedback, you know, from your audiences. The fact that you interact with, you know, different nationalities in different parts of the world, there is, you know, some big idea from each country that you develop. How do you innovate, and what inspires you to do so?
Honestly, I'm just so immersed in the business. I mean, it's, you know, 37 years, you know, I've been involved in tens of thousands of shows and experiences, concerts, events, so it's in my blood, you know, and I have a fantastic team of people. I mean, I have really an incredible team that will go and see anything, you know, so as I say, I will be involved or invest in so many shows, but my COO is fantastic. He goes and watches every single show. He's based out of the UK, which is great, so he can see all of the things. And obviously we travel around, so we go to the US and, you know, all the other markets. So we're just aware of everything that's going on, either because I'm directly involved in it or that my team will go and see it. I mean, obviously I have to sleep a couple of hours a night would be good, so I can't go and see every single show, so we spread the work. So it's not really a point of coming up with inspiration about, you know, we're not creating specific IPs. You know, we've done a couple of things, as I say, in New Zealand in terms of creating pantomime, which is a format, and we're looking at maybe creating an IP down the line that we can own. But essentially what we're doing is working with established, you know, brands and concepts, and we're watching when something opens, when it gets hot. The Minecraft experience was actually quite an interesting one because it opened in Dallas. It was Minecraft's first live entertainment offering. It's just not a space, obviously, that they've ever been in before. And when it opened, the traction behind that was just incredible, and it's an amazingly fun experience. I mean, you're literally in a sort of 3D version of Minecraft, you know. And I went to it in London. I took my kids at sort of 9 and 5, and I don't play Minecraft, so I looked like the parent that didn't know what I was doing while my children were telling me what to do.
Alone.
Exactly, but it was brilliant, and you go around for an hour and you just think, this is amazing. Who would not love this? You know, every market would love this. But then the challenges with that is that you have to find a way to scale it either up or down depending on the space you've got, because obviously some of these experiences you get very big versions, you get small versions. So at the moment I'm just waiting for the correct timing when we can get one of the modules that are already committed. As I say, there'll be 8, I think, in total at the end of this year, and we need to get the one that will fit into the space at Solaire, basically.
People just see a masterpiece live, but they don't know what happens or what happened before that. You know, they just applaud, but they didn't see your blood, sweat, and tears, you know, behind that. So, can you give us, you know, a quick run through of the business, of the supply chain? Maybe part of your response is that, you know, how are the local artists also benefit from this? Does it give more job opportunities also? Of course, aside from giving business to your partners, give us a run through of how a production like a GMG production goes.
There's a little bit of blood, sweat and tears now and again, I would say. Occasional tears mainly. These things are very complicated to deal with. I mean, you know, Les Misérables is 21 40-foot containers and 100 people, you know, cast and crew. So if you think
That's
about
the minimum, 100.
in Les Misérables, yeah,
Okay.
it's a big show, but most of the shows that I'm bringing in are big. Les Mis just happens to be, you know, one of a particular scale. But, you know, Miss Saigon wasn't far behind that. Hamilton, you know, was 25 40-foot containers. So if you look at the logistics of that, when you're touring, Les Mis came from Shanghai. So it finished in Shanghai. The 21 containers have to be shipped. The actors have to be flown over. They have to be put in hotels. They have to do, you know, re-rehearsals. We have to get the containers through customs, you know, which in January it wasn't that. It's not great timing. It's a very busy time of the year for customs. So all of the logistics that go behind that are highly complicated. So you're right. You know, when by the time you turn up and sit in your chair in Solaire, you know, with a wonderful view of this incredible stage, it looks easy. But behind that, there's a team, you know, so say my team here locally is 30, 40 people. In the production and marketing side, we've obviously got the ticketing side to cover off. And then in terms of how do we affect the economy, of course, we have local cast and crew that we're giving jobs to. We have ushers in the venue. You know, Solaire obviously employ more staff. They have their food and beverage outlets. So the economy, you know, moves to that as well. You might have, in the cases of the big shows, people flying in from Cebu or from the provinces. You know, so the airlines are getting money, the hotels are getting money, restaurants are getting money, and that money's coming into Manila. So it's not something that I've asked the government to try and give me some sort of statistic on, but, you know, for sure, you know, when we've got a show like Les Mis that sold 85,000 tickets, those people all coming into Manila, all going into Solaire, you know, they'll all be within that area, and there'll be money that is being spent on the back of bringing that show in.
Wow, wonderful. You immersed yourself into the system, but you know, if you describe yourself, are you more on the creative side or on the money or let's say business side?
Business side, absolutely. I mean, I can appreciate a good show and I can spot an opportunity in terms of, you know, a commercial success, but I wouldn't pretend to say that I would want to create a concept for a show, you know, write it, direct it, you know, that's not something that I want to do. But members of my team do have those skills, and I encourage that, you know, and that's why eventually if we end up with our own IP, that will be fantastic. But no, my role really is commercially trying to make things stack up, and, you know, and the other part of the puzzle really is that we get very good sponsorship from Union Bank. They're our big partner at the moment. So you can say, okay, look, the government isn't giving us, we're not getting any support from the Department of Tourism or anything like that, whereas in Singapore, the Singapore Tourist Board, they actively support the arts. You know, there was that whole sort of controversial situation with Taylor Swift where they obviously bought her for Asia and then upset everybody else because you know, she wasn't allowed to come to Manila or anything else. So their government are very, very aggressive and supportive of the arts, and understanding the amount of money that draws in, you know. And I do remember reading the figures about Taylor Swift and how much money that brought into Singapore. So as we don't get that here, I look for other partners.
What trends in audience preferences are you seeing in the Philippines for live entertainment?
Usually, I mean, the trends remained fairly consistent in terms of the audience, the ticket buyers, mainly 25 to 35 years old and 65.
Is that a good thing? Because that's pretty young.
It is young. I mean, 65 of them would be female. It's very young in terms of established markets. You know, again, you know, Europe, US, Australia, the ticket buyers would be, you would say, 45 to 65.
A little bit older, yeah.
Would be older, just because the markets are more established. But also in China, the demographic is also young. But what's interesting is that over the sort of 16 years that we've been bringing these international shows over, the demographic hasn't really changed. And you would have thought that over that period of time and the number of shows that we brought in, the 25 to 35-year-olds 16 years ago, the bracket would have gone up. So you'd be expecting to see 35 to 50-year-olds now. Also a big sector of ticket buyers, but that hasn't happened. It's remained in that demographic. So I don't know, and it's a question that I've asked myself many times, and we've tried to research, is what happens to those 25 to 35-year-olds now. Now they are middle income people, so
They have purchasing power?
yeah, purchasing power. So it might well be they go to the theatre and then obviously then they start a family, and then the focus goes more onto that, and spending money. Children are not expensive, are expensive. I mean, so maybe that takes them out of that cycle to a certain extent, and then the new batch come in. Which is why we see that when we bring shows in, I usually wait minimum of 5, but normally 10 years. I mean, again, Les Mis was here in 2016, the theatrical production, so it's back literally 10 years later. So that gives us a chance to get that market back. If we bring shows in too early, historically found is that you sell 60% of the tickets on a return, and again. Personally, I think that's because if you go and see Cats, let's say, you've put a reasonable amount of your disposable income into seeing that, and it comes back 5 years later. You don't really want to see Cats again. You want to see, Phantom of the Opera or Wicked or Hamilton.
Speaking of tickets, you mentioned off-cam, and it's in the news that Les Mis is sold out, but that is not necessarily the same in other plays or other musicals. So, as a producer, how do you gauge if you have to stop that kind of production, or if you have to change your direction because you have experience in different parts of the world? So how do you manage continuing a specific production? At what point of the production that you say, I'm losing, I'll stop this immediately?
Honestly, because we are part of a tour, we have to work out how many weeks do we think we can play, how many tickets do we think we can sell per title. Obviously, the ideal scenario is that we get it right and we sell out, but we sell out without being able to sell another 2 or 3 weeks because we can't change the schedule. Les Mis is a perfect example of that. So we put it on sale, at a very, very big on sale, and then we announced the cast. Obviously, the local cast that are in it very strong, and then it's sold out, the 85,000 tickets. Now, we could have probably put another 2 or 3 weeks on sale, but I can't because it needs to open in Singapore.
Yeah.
So there's no choice. Now Singapore have put it on sale, and as it happens, they're the last stop. So they've managed to add 2 weeks.
Wow.
Okay, so that's lucky for them.
Looking ahead, would you consider more original or Filipino-led productions to deepen local engagement? I know that you have also established your roots here in the Philippines.
We did a local production of Come From Away last year, which was different because we've always focused on bringing in international productions. So we did that with a local cast. That was a title that I always liked. I thought it was a very clever show, and it was a little bit complicated, even when I watched it, because the accents of the characters, in the original production were quite hard to follow the Newfoundland accent from Canada. So I thought, well, look, that's a title that we could do locally. We won't have that issue in terms of the language, which we did, and it was a very successful production. I mean, fantastic reviews, and I personally thought it was one of the best productions that I've seen of it. But the reality is, there are local companies, focusing on, local theatre, which works well. Their model works well for them, and for me, I would rather focus on bringing in the big international shows, because that's really something very, very unique that we have. There's nobody else doing it, so I think that on this occasion, given the fact the business is risky as it is, I want to really focus on that. I'm not saying that we wouldn't look at another local production, but for now I think we'll stick with the plan.
Okay. What advice do you have for event and production entrepreneurs aiming to break into the live entertainment space?
Get a real job.
I didn't expect that. Okay. Can you elaborate, Carlos?
It is a very, very risky business to be in, to be honest. Entertainment, everybody knows that. I mean, look at movies as well. Sometimes you can spend an absolute fortune producing a show or producing a movie, and nobody wants to see it, and you can't pay people to go and see it. So it's extremely risky. But of course, if your passion's there and you want to go get into that business, apply for a job for GMG Productions. We'll help you out. But no, it's difficult. I mean, there's lots of different avenues and different roles that you can take up, and your production, obviously from the production side through to acting, through to directing, through to writing. So I think ultimately, if people really want to get into it and they're passionate about doing it, then they just need to put a lot of hard work into progressing that. And everybody knows that when there's a role that comes up, for a show, 200 people might apply for that role. So it's a tough business if you're on the acting side. And commercially, as I say, you have to be well funded, because not every show wins. You can win big and you can lose big. So the key to it is to be in enough titles globally in different continents, so that you can ultimately stay ahead.
Carlos, the Filipino audience really appreciate your work. The audience is watching now. Where can they find you? Where can they learn more about Les Mis and the other productions, the upcoming productions that you will be producing? And if you can invite them, please.
No, sure. I mean, absolutely. I would say, follow GMG Productions on socials, obviously Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Join our GMGP list and you'll be the first people to find out about what shows are coming. So don't miss it, because one of the problems with Les Misérables at the moment is, my phone non-stop pings because people want to get tickets because it's sold out. It's sold out. So I would say book earlier, because sometimes we have very late booking patterns. If you want to come and see these shows, I would appreciate it if you could support it and book earlier. And also, if you're a Union Bank card holder, you get access to booking earlier. Wonders of the World, go and see it. It's really fantastic. You really should go and see that as well. But again, the key is to book early. I mean, and Friends, funnily enough, as I mentioned earlier, the Friends experience was a classic example. When it opened, it was absolutely packed. You couldn't get in. And then there was a week, sort of just towards the end, where it's slightly quiet. And then the last week, everybody's obviously realised, oh, it's closing. And then it's packed. I mean, it's absolutely packed and you can't get in. So I'd be grateful if people could support what I'm trying to do here and build the market. And I want to bring more and more of these shows, but I can't do it if you don't support us and come and see the shows. And also the ticket prices aren't as expensive as you think. There is a broad range, for 2,500 or 2,000 for the lowest price ticket, up to 8,500 or 7,500 depending on the show. Please support us. I'm trying to grow the business here, so that everybody can enjoy it ultimately.
Wow, this has been an exciting conversation with Carlos Candal, the founder and CEO of GMG Productions. Maraming salamat sa isang oras na pagsama sa amin upang tunghayan ng isang makabuluhang usapan ukol sa negosyo dito lang sa Open for Business. Hanggang sa susunod na linggo, samahan nyo kaming muli dito sa Open for Business. Catch us too on Facebook and YouTube. Like and subscribe on our social media page at Net25 TV. We will bring you more insights from industry experts, thought leaders, CEOs, and featured SMEs. Together, let us help encourage business development in the Philippines. Sharpen your business acumen, feel the pulse, and set the trend for as long as you're informed and open for business. Ito po si Cesar Vallejos. Marami pong salamat.